But even from a bioavailable nutrient perspective for our bodies, well, carrots are rich in supposedly vitamin A, but they don't have the bioavailable version of vitamin A. So they have it in beta carotene. And our body has to, again, and this depends on the gut health, but your body has to convert it to the vitamin A bioavailable form that it could even use, right? So there are some genetic differences where some people don't have the genetics to really break down the plant version of vitamin A to be the absorbed version of vitamin A. Or you could just eat liver and get your, worth in your daily values worth in like 3 ounces, right? And that even if you have the most impaired gut health, since meat is so bioavailable and readily absorbable by the body, you have a higher chance of absorbing the vitamin A from the beef liver in a very small dosage compared to if you were to eat carrots.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well, and I hope everyone is starting back at episode 1 to make sure to catch all the great info. This is supposed to be an audio series on health and nutrition, as well as lifestyle, and it unfolds live over the past 112 episodes. I don't have sponsors, so I don't have any other motivations to do this podcast other than to provide valuable information that I believe in. So I don't have to do these each week, and I do them because I want to do them. And each guest is purposefully handpicked and researched and adds another piece to the endless puzzle of human health. Today, I'm talking with my friend Judy Cho, who I've been following for a long time on Instagram, and she has done a great job of providing people with easy to understand animal-based health information. She's a nutritional therapy practitioner and the author of Carnivore Cure. Judy holds a psychology and communications degree from the University of California, Berkeley. Judy has a holistic health private practice and works with clients by focusing on the root cause for an array of health challenges. Together, they work to create individualized solutions that are sustainable for the long term. I like it. She lives in Austin and will be part of our growing Sapien community there. We start off with some mask and COVID talk, so I want to put out a trigger warning for sensitive viewers who don't want to hear differing opinions than ones on the mainstream media. For the first time that I'm aware of, a guest talks about vaccines. I don't like to touch on the subject, but it was nice to hear some thoughts on this from someone who's balanced and considers both sides. And so, because I have no sponsors, I get to talk about the products we make at nosetotale.org. These are all whole food, nutrient-dense products that I believe in. And last week I mentioned my favorite products. Now I'll do a different list of things that I've been using recently. And one of those is the soap. We are just getting the soap back in stock. So I'll take them from out of stock on the website at nosetotale.org, and you'll find that they are now in stock by the time you hear this episode. And these are the beef tallow soaps. That is the only soap I use now. We're doing a new scent, which will take another couple weeks to come out, but we have our old scents in stock as well as our unscented one. We also are doing unscented skin food for those who are sensitive to strong aromas or just would prefer to not have any of the essential oils involved in their product. We also have baby balm, which is like the skin food, but for babies. All natural, no scents, only a couple ingredients. Very, very good product. I do not have a baby. I've never dealt with a baby, but I've heard that this is the best stuff for babies. So that's at nosetotale.org under our body care products. Another great one is our beef bacon. I haven't talked about this a lot lately, but it is bacon made from beef. Yes, it's smoked, it's fatty, it's delicious. You can get that as part of a fresh meat box, 10-pound minimum order. 20 pounds, you get free shipping. That's free shipping. A giant box of meat all the way across the country for free. It's a good deal. Check it out, nosetotale.org. And the art is live. The art is live. Forgot to mention that. Click on the art section. We have a great artist out of the UK doing animal-based prints. And now for a seasoning. So a seasoning I've been using is the Cajun and Memphis Heat. Either of those are good. Memphis Heat is hotter, but either of those can be used for a variety of things. We made some fries in an air fryer, used some potatoes this weekend. Oh my God. We had some starches. It was crazy. We air fried some potatoes with some Cajun seasoning and some salt. It was delicious. But also I made some carne asada last week with some lime and the Cajun seasoning, and it essentially creates a carne asada style flavor. So just add that lime, maybe some extra salt and pepper, and you're good. So get all those at nosetotale.org. And we have the Sapien program, Sapien Tribe. We've got something for everyone. If you're earlier on your journey and you want to have some guidance, it's more than weight loss. It's about health creation. That's sapien.org, and go down to the program. We have some discounts going on there, and the tribe This is how you support this show. It's how you be part of our online community. Get the show notes, get the bonus episodes, get the private Zoom calls, all the other good stuff. Join us, some like-minded individuals. And other than that, just share the show with friends, give it a review on iTunes or any other podcast app. Check out the Food Lies YouTube for the video versions, which I'm doing now. I started recording video with my guests. We also have the Sapien Show, which we do live in person with Dr. Gary, and we've had some great guests on in the really nice studio, 4 cameras, quality stuff there. If anyone knows of great guests who live in LA or will be traveling to LA, let us know. We'd love to have them in studio. And without further ado, here is Judy Cho. All right. Hello, Judy. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. This is Nutrition with Judy. She's great on Instagram. If you can follow her at Nutrition with Judy. I also have her book, Carnivore Cure. Really awesome book. We're going to dive into all this type of stuff. But yeah, she's over in Austin where I'm going to move soon. She was part of our meetup for Halloween time. And yeah, how's it going in Austin?
It's good. We had our first snow. It rarely ever snows in Austin, and we had full snow. The floors were covered with snow, so our kids had such a fun day. I think the whole city kind of shut down because we're not used to that much snow, but it's been fun. I mean, I think it's a lot more open than a lot of the rest of the country right now. And so I'm very appreciative and grateful for that too. So I just found out that the city ordinance does not require masks for kids under 12. And I did not know that. And so I have been telling my kids not to wear masks at all. I think they went to one store and they were saying that they require everyone 2 and under. So I didn't get a slide by that. But in general, it's been good. I don't feel that it's as closed down as other places, fortunately. So
yeah, that's good. And maybe you could talk about, as a parent, just about children masks, because it just seems a little unnecessary to put through kids. It's kind of traumatic. Or I've seen different studies actually that try to document the ill effects of masks on children. Yeah.
So our public schools opened up and there was this laundry list, this really long report they said that kids going in and out of the classes have to use hand sanitizers. They have to wear masks at all times. They have to social distance on the playground, so they cannot be 6 feet next to another child. And my kid was going into kindergarten, so it would be his first exposure to public schools. And I just was not okay with a lot of those things. I have a bunch of blog posts and social media posts about how toxic sanitizers can be. We can talk about that. But even the masks, I just, including the social distancing, to tell a 5-year-old or 6-year-old that if they want to play with their friend and then say, hey, you can't be next to each other on a playground, just is nonsensical to me. And then to have that as their kind of first experience at a real school, I think would be so traumatizing. And then already thinking as a child, okay, so a stranger, someone that's not part of my family, can get me sick. I can't inherently trust them. I think that's so toxic. And so we pulled our kids out of school. We tried the online for a little bit. It's so many hours of just staring at a screen, just not ideal. And so we pulled our kids. The mask in general, I mean, there's so many different studies, so I don't want to get super controversial. But I know that the mask, oftentimes you're breathing back your carbon dioxide and it can affect the air and the oxygen that goes to your brain. And I just don't want that for my kids. I tell my kids, I know, again, this is kind of controversial, but we don't truly see that there's benefits in wearing a mask. Now, I will comply going into a store. I will follow your rules. But in general, the perfect example I always give is we were in our car and the neighbor's car, I think they were smoking. And so we were able to breathe in their smoke. And I was telling my husband, how ridiculous is this that, we're not even wearing masks within our car, but, we're in totally different vehicles, more than 6 feet apart, but I could still smell their smoke. And, how are we to say that these masks, right, are working effectively? And then when we take it all off at the same time in the same kind of locations, whether it's restaurants or on the plane, the logic is not often there. Now, again, if I need to support these restaurants and stores that make us comply, that's fine. But in general, the ending message for me is, what are we teaching our young kids, right? If your kid is junior high, high school, maybe, but as a young kid that knows nothing about the world, and to say, you can't be near your friend, you have to wear a mask, you can't show expression on your face, only with your eyes, you have to use sanitizer that we know if we touch like plastics, it affects us. The BPA affects our hormones. So then how can you not think that using these sanitizers all the time are also wiping away our gut bugs, our skin bugs that then affect our gut bugs in our entire body? The FDA, they released a list of sanitizers that should not be used because of the toxicity levels. And there's much more information I go into in depth, but a lot of this stuff is so harmful to kids, especially when they're so young. And I talked to a psychologist. I said, I really worry about our next generation. What does this tell us? Imagine them getting into new relationships with a significant other, and already they'll have this mindset of, I can't trust you. I don't know where you're from. I don't know if you have disease. Are you going to breathe some illness to me, and am I going to get sick? And how are we supposed to build intimacy and connection when that's how we thrive as a human race? These things really bother me to the depths of my soul. And then the psychologist's simple answer was, well, they're going to all be messed up together, so it'll be kind of the norm. And that was just a sad, sad response of, well, I don't want my kids to be affected. So my kids are so shielded from all of the stuff going on with the illness now. But we go out. We went to a playground in Austin public park, and there were 50 kids, no mask, maybe one or two. And it was beautiful to see, right? That they're just kind of living their lives, not fearing what could be. And, no one was social distancing, but they were enjoying being a child. And this is so important during this time.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that message. And yeah, there's a lot of unintended consequences of that. Yeah, we're still going to be finding out for years to come. And
Absolutely.
I like to look at both sides of this. I mean, everyone's heard the mainstream side. Like, everyone's turned on the TV and seen the mainstream side. So when I try to talk about the other side, I'm not saying the mainstream side doesn't exist. I'm trying to offer another opinion, so at least we can look at both sides. So I always like to look at both sides, and then we can still make up our mind, but at least we look at the other side. Because I went home to Hawaii. I haven't done a podcast since. And when I was home, I was exposed to a lot of people my age, younger, who were very scared, still staying home. They're in Hawaii. It was just kind of perplexing to me that the people have only gotten one message this entire time, right? They very rarely get any other message than what's said on the sort of CNN type of news. And these people are at the beach, scared to take off a mask. They're healthy 20-year-olds scared to see other people. And it was just kind of alarming. I was like, haven't you heard about this other side of the data? There's a lot of other data out there. I'm not saying that, if you have an elderly, sick grandparent that lives with you, that you should go out and party. I didn't say that.
Right.
I'm not telling you to do anything. And if you want to take your own risks and precautions, absolutely. But the problem was no one heard the other side of the argument, or no one thought about the unintended consequences. No one is exposed to this other information. So, I mean, I if you have other ideas, like, keep going, because it's just, we need to have more open discussions about this stuff.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that is perplexing to me is, so I'm originally from Los Angeles, so I have a lot of friends and family still there. And they are getting fed, they're all really scared. I have a friend that's in her 30s, and she told me since this kind of second wave of lockdown, she won't even go to the grocery store anymore. And I don't try to push my agenda or that, I don't say go eat meat-based or anything, but I know her fear stems from, she's a little overweight and her son has asthma and he's 7, but he's also a little overweight. So my question, and I know I always have this debate with my husband, and he's like, it's so much easier for you to kind of say, or be on your high horse and say, just go eat meat and heal your body. But for not everyone, it's as easy. But, I can't help but think it's been 8 months, 9 months since all of this has happened. We can really heal a lot in that time, right? So in my book, I talk about how allergies and kids specifically with asthma has been on the rise in the last, I don't know, like several decades. And we have to wonder if we are eating a lot of foods that are toxic to our gut and most of our immune health is in our gut, then why don't we change our diet, right? So we had 9 months to eat a cleaner diet. And maybe they're misinformed, maybe, right? But we know that sugar is not healthy for us, right? In eating in excess, but you see people gaining weight in COVID. And I get it because when your cortisol's high, your natural kind of desire is to reach out for more sugar because it's a quick way to get energy. So because your body thinks it needs to run from like an animal. But in general, if people were to just focus on changing their diet and eating healthier, that is the best safeguard to this virus going on. Now, if you're born immunocompromised, it's a different story, right? So therefore, yes, we should shield that population. But even my mom, she is almost 70. She was diabetic. She was taking metformin, had no idea how to control her sugars. So she was saying, oh, I'm not supposed to eat sugar. So she cut out the sugar, cut out ice cream, but she was still eating rice, still eating noodles. Her blood sugar in the mornings were in the 180s. She was suffering from asthma because of the adverse effects of diabetes, and she had dermatitis, and she was waking up multiple times a night. Long story short, she basically went carnivore. She eats like 5% carbs, maybe avocados, some kimchi, that type of stuff. She reversed all of it, right? So yes, she's 70. She's in the higher risk group, but I am less scared that she will die from this because she took her health into her own hands. And now she's not taking metformin. Her blood sugar's in the mornings in the hundreds maybe. And she eats a meat-based diet, a one that she can afford. And she's doing well. But even still, because she's in Los Angeles, or I don't know if it's her peers or what, but she is so scared. She was supposed to come visit us in Austin during Christmas, and she didn't come because the news said that the emergency rooms were completely full. And so if she got sick, she would have no bed to be in. And so she canceled her trip. But this is, and I was telling her, the chance of you dying from this is slim because you are taking care of your body. But they were so scared and they just canceled. And it's just unfortunate because yes, it's the unknown that's so scary to most. But the thing is, that's how a lot of the media, a lot of these agendas or narratives or whatever you want to call it, that's how they make people run, right? How does marketing work? It's focusing on the fear, right? So, oh, do you smell bad? Well, this is why you need antiperspirants, right? Like that's how marketing sells, by using fear, right? You don't want to be the smelly person. You don't want to be the person that's this, and this. Well, this is the same way they're keeping people locked in, right? So it's if they were to say, hey, maybe you should change your diet and your likelihood of dying from of this virus is much less, maybe it would cause people to focus on changing their diet. But instead it's, hey, let's stay closed and be behind closed doors and just let this kind of pass. Let's, lower the curve and whatever else. But I know in Los Angeles, for example, they have never reopened restaurants indoors, right? They've done the outdoor eating. They've been really, really strict with masks, but I mean, it's not like it's better controlled there. And so at a certain point, you have to wonder why, right? Texas, at least in Austin specifically, they opened restaurants probably a month after they closed, and we've never closed them again. I think almost everything is open. We wear masks. I went to Target the other day. It was so busy. There was no line. But you don't hear it as bad, right? And people generally don't seem as scared. And so we just have to wonder, why is this happening, right? Why is the nation so different? And there are pockets of more fear than others, but it's not like it's helping any, right? So if California showed the sweeping healing from doing these measures, then maybe we could say, okay, maybe what you guys are doing makes sense, but it's actually the opposite. So
it's on the rise like crazy here.
Or is it the lack of herd immunity, right? So there's all these things, and it's just unfortunate that at a certain point you have to question, what you're hearing, right? Like 9 months in, there's something we could have done about it. And maybe I seem callous, I don't know, but I tell my husband, we all have a decision. Every time we put food in our mouths, we have a decision, right? We can choose to eat healthier foods if that means that we no longer have to be scared and be stuck in our homes because we're afraid we're going to get this, disease or virus that has like a 98.5% survival rate, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so sometimes online I'll post something and then someone will come in, usually at the end, that doesn't follow me, so I know they came from a hashtag maybe, and they're a non-follower, kind of a troll type person, and they'll say something. They're like, "Oh, this guy's suggesting that you could just change your health in like no time." And I said, "Yeah, we're 10 months in," and I always use our mutual friend Laura Spath as an example. And I tagged her. I was like, "Yeah, my friend Laura Spath lost half her body weight in 10 months."
Right.
This happened 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago, she lost half her body weight in a 10-month span. Maybe it was 10 and a half. It was right about the time it's been since COVID. So, I mean, absolutely, you can make a huge difference. And so, yeah, maybe in the first month when we didn't know it was going to be this long, maybe you have to take extreme precautions and you can't think long term. But once we realized this was going to be a long term thing, which was pretty quickly, we started shutting everything down and saying, "Oh, we're going to wait for the vaccine," stuff like that. That's when we should have been like, "Okay, now let's all get healthy. Now let's all get healthy." Bill Maher was saying this the whole time. I don't know if I saw their mainstream people doing it. I kept posting Bill Maher videos of him just shouting at everyone, "Why is no one talking about this? No one is talking about getting healthy." And then another thing, I wanted to get into herd immunity stuff too, because this is all going to tie into, immune health, gut microbiome, and all this type of stuff. Just what we're trying to do here is get people healthy and, change their diet and lifestyle. But the herd immunity aspect, I always had this idea that was what was going on in LA. LA has been following these guidelines extremely well. You go outside, people are on the beach with masks on. I just made fun of the Hawaii people with masks on the beach. But I was in Malibu yesterday. There was a family of 5. They were on the beach and there was no one for 100 yards around. They were by this little pocket of the beach. It was out in Point Dume. No one was there. They all had masks on the entire time in the middle of the sun, in the middle of the wind, with no one remotely close to them. And it was okay. That's my example. Everywhere you go, 100% mask. Everyone's doing all the things, precautions, everything. I think if you overdo it, if you hide too much, now you are having a problem with herd immunity. You're hurting yourself with herd immunity, and maybe that's why LA is having a bad time, because we did flatten the curve early because people were so scared and they stayed home so well that we didn't get it through our population that much, and now we're dealing with those consequences. These are the repercussions of not getting it in the herd immunity. Is we have a lot of vulnerable people here in LA. There's a lot of sick people that are overweight and who aren't even that old. There's a bad food problem, I think, here in LA and just food culture. But these people now are still vulnerable. And then maybe other places like Austin, everyone's doing their thing. Like Sweden, people are doing their thing because of herd immunity. So I don't know.
So the way that herd immunity is supposed to work, and I think Fauci even said, he said by November of this year, if all of us get vaccinated, or a majority of us, then the herd immunity should take effect in the entire US, and that we can all basically come out, right? So the way that herd immunity is supposed to work is that basically all of us kind of are carriers, and then we kind of spread it around, that at a certain point it's mutated enough or it's in the population enough that then when it finally gets to the really sick or the immunocompromised, that it's almost a dead virus and that it really doesn't have the kind of potency to really get them hurt. So if you think about Los Angeles from that sort of perspective, if people have been following the mask, the staying at home, and not really kind of transmitting all of the virus, then yes, maybe there's a possibility that herd immunity hasn't taken place there. And so instead, what's happening is that people are still more contagious, if you even want to consider it that. And then, but the crazy part is that, the saving grace to all of it is, well, we'll just wait for the vaccines, right? So we can just get the vaccine and then we'll be healed. But there's just not enough research done. I mean, this vaccine was pushed really quickly. It's the first mRNA where basically it can affect your DNA, the way that it expresses. And so I think in some of the earlier testing, they said that you can't try to conceive when you get this shot, right? So these are things that are really concerning. I think I just saw not too long ago that Pfizer and the other brand, I forgot the other company, but they basically are pushing like $40 million or some large amount of money to advertise to that population that do want to get pregnant. So women in their mid to late 20s to 30s, I guess they're not getting the vaccine as often. And so now they're marketing to them to say like, hey, it's safe. You can have kids still getting the shot. But these are things that aren't really vetted out. There's been doctors that have died after getting the vaccine. And so it's under investigation. But the concern is it just has never gone through what typical vaccines have gone through. And then on top of that, this is a whole different type of vaccine, right? That can affect the way your genes are expressed. And that is so scary, right? Just again, we don't know. And the fact that people are willing and waiting in line to get these shots that you don't know what it can do to you. And even if you don't have any effects right away, we don't know long-term what it can do, possibly if you have kids, or in just years and decades to come, how it affects your DNA, right? So these are things that are just scary. And the fact that, it almost sounds too good to be true, right? So we have this virus. We don't even know how to basically manage the common cold. We don't know. Every year, the flu vaccine is maybe 40%, maybe it's 30% successful. But we think with this vaccine or with this COVID that we don't even know how to manage it. But now we have a vaccine that, hey, it's going to be the answer to everything, right? It's just the logic is not there. But so many people, it's the saving grace. I don't know how else to say it, but it's just, everyone's hedging all their bets on that. And it's just scary because it's a type of vaccine that has never been around before. And then even in my book, I talk about just the conventional vaccines, how there's so many adjuvants, additives that are really toxic to us. So, maybe there are reasons why our kids are sicker than are dying. Our infant rate is much higher than any other like top 50 country.
Infant mortality rate. Yeah, I saw that. The infant mortality rate in the US is the worst. And what is that? Is that like the westernized countries?
Yeah, I think it was a top 50 in terms of wealth. And so we are the top like 5%, or maybe it's 1% of all wealthy countries. But when it comes to our death rate, we're one of the last. Yeah. And and I need to do a blog post on this, but there's been some research that shows that basically the amount of vaccines you get, especially at the infant age, the higher the mortality rates have been. Now, obviously, correlation doesn't mean causation, but I need to dig deeper into the study. But it does show that our country, the US, has the most vaccines of all these countries, and there's over 50 to 100 of them. And we are one of the most richest countries, yet we have the worst infant mortality. And one thing I found recently, and again, I have to do a little bit more research to really kind of put out the content, so I haven't yet, but in the period of COVID, so 8 months, 50% of infants have not gone back to get their vaccines. 50% are delayed with their vaccines. But there is also a correlation that shows that infants are not dying as much in the US. And so we have to wonder, is some of it the vaccines, right? Not all infants go to school, because some of the arguments are, oh, they're not exposed to other people, so they're not dying. If it really was because of schools, right, you would hear that in the media that, if your infant or your child or your baby goes to school, there's a higher risk your baby's going to die, right? But there are risks of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, or these other things that are possibly linked to vaccines. And again, why is it that in the last 8 months, our infant mortality rate has decreased, but then so have 50% of the vaccines given to them in the time period they're supposed to get. And we have the most vaccines in a very short period for when the babies are babies. And so we have to wonder, is there any correlation?
Yeah, this whole vaccine stuff, I've actually never gotten into it. I've never done content on it. I've never talked about it on a podcast before, but I have no problem talking about it because it's really interesting to me. It's something that I haven't gotten into and I don't have a strong opinion about, but I like, as I always do, look at both sides. And so I have been talking to a few more people about hearing the other side because I've always been, pro-vaccine. I was like, that sounds great, because I didn't know much about it. And I've, gotten vaccines when I had to. I went to, I guess it was because I went to South Africa or South America. I had to get something. I was like, all right, I'll get it. But I also never get the flu shot and I just don't want it. And, I'd rather not have the new mRNA vaccine. I'd rather not take it because I feel like I'm perfectly healthy and that I don't need it. And I don't want to be part of this new experimental group that we're doing this mass experiment on. So I'm kind of just saying I have no dog in this fight, but I do like to hear the negatives to vaccines because I'm kind of questioning everything these days, right?
Yeah. So I actually vaccinated my kids because I had no idea too. So, I was the perfect kind of patient. Doctor said I need a vaccine. Okay, vaccine, right? So I did everything. So my youngest is vaccinated until I think the age of 2. And then my oldest he has all his vaccines up to, and so I will not be probably getting any more. But, the thing is there are vaccine injuries. It's a true fact. And then there are, there was a law that basically the government passed where the vaccine companies are no longer responsible for the injuries. So they have ways that they kind of, hush pay out for medical injuries. But in general, you cannot sue the company. I think there's ways that you get around it to get the money for your kid that's injured. But the thing is, where I don't know where I honestly stand with as soon as your baby's born, should you get vaccinated? Because my babies are vaccinated. So I never really went in depth there. But what I do know is when your child has any compromised health when they're young, if they are developing slower, if you had in vitro, right? If you did anything that kind of had to support your pregnancy, it may be smarter just to space out your vaccines, right? So maybe there is mercury in vaccines. There is dead animal cells. There's dead human cells. There's dead fetus. There's monkey brain cells. There's aluminum and mercury, right? So we think we get most of our mercury toxicity from fish, but we're actually getting it from vaccines. So the thought is, if your child is a little bit weaker when born or as growing up, maybe it's smarter to spread out the vaccines. There is so many vaccines that are given right when the baby's born up to 6 months. I have it in the book. I don't remember the exact numbers, but for some kids, it's toxic, right? So that might just be the amount that will push the kid over to get sick long-term, right? So these are the things that we should consider. And again, it's not that I'm super anti-vax or anything. Again, I don't know. Maybe we just get the amount that I got when I was born in the 80s, right? We now get 3 times, or I forgot the amount, but it's a laundry list more. So what happened in the 30 years since I got vaccines that my kids now have to get, 3 times that? Like, what happened in the world that was so toxic that we need to get that? I got chickenpox when I was little, and now there's a vaccine so that you don't have to get it. Well, I don't know, again, all the nuances with the research, so I'm sure someone can argue me, but the reason we get chickenpox is so that we build immunity so that in the future we don't get other diseases. But now that we are giving the immunity for it, we no longer allow the body to now build the resiliency. So if they get shingles in the future or some other disease, they don't have the immunity to fight it. So these are the things, right? So what was so wrong with getting chickenpox? The death rate for chickenpox is nearly none. And so what's so wrong if we got chickenpox other than it's so itchy and it's miserable while you have it, right? So now none of our kids get it. And so these are the things where we just have to wonder, why are we taking so much more? Why do we get There are some countries that maybe there's 13 shots and we have like 30 something. Like, why? Right? So these are some questions we should be asking. And I think we just blindly trust our doctors and our authority. And we say, okay, you guys say that we need this for our child and we get it. One good example is, it's when our babies are young, we say no eggs, no certain foods because they are higher in food sensitivities. Your kid may have an anaphylactic shock. And so eggs are kind of out of the question, at least when they're very young. Well, flu shots. So when I was pregnant, I got the flu shot because I didn't know. That was the first time I ever got it. Well, they have egg whites in them, right? So egg whites are not only bad because they have albumin, which is a protein that can cause this anaphylactic IgG or IgA response, but it also has other proteins that are gut damaging. So you have to wonder if a baby has an egg sensitivity, why are we giving flu shots when there's egg whites in the shot, right? Now, some people say, well, if you do it with the doctor, the chance of you getting sick is okay. It's pretty safe. But the logic, again, for me is not there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I wonder how many of the things that I have a few friends that are pregnant right now, and they have this laundry list of things they can't eat. And I'm just wondering how many of these things are just because our modern diet and lifestyle are so messed up that we're correlating, these bigger problems that have to do with other things, not the food.
Yeah, so that's one thing that's one thing I posted about not too long ago. So when we're pregnant, we are told not to eat fish because of the mercury toxicity and other sort of the raw fish can have like other pathogens that can be toxic to the baby. But we are also told not to eat the raw fish because of possible mercury. But we are also told to take there's some certain vaccines. I can't even remember off the top of my head. I think it's whooping cough, maybe. And I know the flu vaccine, but these have mercury in it. So it's okay to get these shots and then the booster shot while you're pregnant, but we shouldn't be eating fish that has the omega-3s, the DHA, EPA that we need for a baby's brain to properly grow, even so much that they actually are now adding these, the fish oil nutrients to our formulas for babies, right? We need these for proper brain growth. So how many people are now not eating fish, and how is it affecting our baby and their brains? But we get the shots.
It's interesting. I don't want to do too much more on this vaccine stuff because I don't even want to look into it. I'm scared because I don't want to go down this rabbit hole and find out that it's one of these other big bad lies out there.
What I'll say is I don't talk about vaccines in the book, but I just talk about mercury and where we are susceptible to mercury. And then I talk about, there's just a couple tables in the book where it just talks about all the ingredients that are specifically in certain vaccines. And it's from the CDC website. It's not like I pulled it from a random site. It's from the CDC, shows all these ingredients. And what's funny is that, all the vegans are pro, animals or supporting them, but almost every vaccine has either a fetus cell or an animal cell. So, I mean, it's like it begs the question for vegans, but yeah, but then there's also all these adjuvants. So you can take a look at that. It's pretty eye-opening.
I will. And another thing I wanted to get into that's, I'm sure in your book, I didn't read it all. You can actually, this book is so great. There's so many diagrams and so much info. You could just flip it open to any page and just start reading and looking at tables and all that stuff. But about just development of humans, we're talking about pregnancy, we're talking about babies. I always go back to Weston Price, right? And what he found all these different populations were eating. And so again, since I have a couple pregnant friends, they're saying that, they're not supposed to eat this, or they're talking about their cravings and all this type of stuff. And usually the cravings seem like sort of the bad foods. And another quick thing out there, I feel like if you have a craving just in general, and if it's for a modern food, it's probably wrong. But if you have a craving for an ancestral food, it's probably right. If you're craving salmon, it's probably for a reason. But if you're craving Cheetos, it's probably because Cheetos are addicting.
Yeah, but think about Cheetos. So, and I totally agree with you, but I think your brain is smart enough to kind of decipher certain parts of the Cheeto, let's say. So let's say you are not feeding your body enough fat and your body needs fat. So it'll probably say, fine, eat the Cheeto. So at least I can pull some of the fat from it.
Yeah.
Even though it's toxic, at least it's something for survival.
Needs something. Well, it needs energy. Yeah, the brain's wired for energy. And so, yes,
Right.
you'll want that energy. But, well, yeah, so just the most nutrient-dense foods, maybe you could talk about those foods that are needed to grow a baby's brain and, DHA and all these kind of stuff that Weston Price found. They were eating fish eggs. They were, doing all these different things around the world.
Yeah, so Weston A. Price went around the world trying to find, he was really looking at the teeth, but he went around all these different countries and he found that there was no vegan, no culture that was primarily plant-based or vegan or vegetarian. And what he found was the most nutrient-dense foods were the sacred foods that they would save for the moms and the children, right? The people that were growing, the moms that were either nursing a baby or they were going to be pregnant. So these were the livers, the cod liver, or like you said, the salmon roe. So they're all really, really nutrient dense. So every bite per ounce is so much more nutrient dense than if you were to eat just muscle meat or eat a piece of chicken breast. And they all revered fats, right? So you need fats. The brain is 60% fat. 25% of all of your cholesterol is in your brain. So what's really scary is when we are taking statins and we are reducing the cholesterol in our bodies, how much of the cholesterol is also being removed from our brains, right? So if you think about that, there are correlations with men that take statins and then you see them have mood disorders or they start getting depressed or having anger issues. And you wonder if they're taking statins and it's removing some of the cholesterol that helps with even the kind of mood balance. How is that affecting them? We need fats for the brain to grow. The brain's primary fuel source is fats. And so if you are not eating enough fats, you are compromising the health of a brain, right? So I tell my kids all the time as they're creating these Legos, every single piece of the Lego is super important to then create this great production. If you don't, every single piece connected makes the kind of Lego look good together. But if for every piece that's bad, it will kind of compromise the entire Lego project. And so with the same, as you are kind of building a baby inside your body, you have to eat the right foods and the right nutrients to then fuel the body and the baby for good health. If we eat a lot of carbs, for example, the glucose goes straight to the baby. And I don't think, and I'm kind of forgetting, but I don't think all of the insulin from our bodies are also given to the baby. So the baby has to produce its own insulin to manage all that glucose that's given. And that's where it becomes really dangerous if a mom is, showing like diabetic and high blood pressure while they're pregnant. If you eat more ancestral based, as you say, or, meat based, and you eat the high fats, these meats with a lot of nutrition and the salmon roe, these are the nutrients that will be supporting a baby to grow. And so I actually have a bonus guide that comes with the Carnivore Cure, and it is foods that all mothers, babies, pregnant moms, nursing moms should be eating. And it's really all these foods. So like egg yolks are really nutrient dense. Salmon roes, we said, beef liver, chicken liver, and eating a variety, right? So I've been talking about this a lot, but eating pork is really important too, because pork has the most thiamine, so B1, than any other meat. You can eat 2 pounds of beef or beef liver in a day, and you won't be meeting the daily requirements for thiamine, which is in pork. Whereas in pork, you can eat 9 ounces and you'll have the 100% plus of the daily value. So eating a very kind of a variety of a meat-based diet and eating lots of fat. I think fat is really key for hormones and for brain health, because again, the brain prefers fat as its fuel source.
Yeah, I found that out. In the science, it's hard to do because it always will take glucose, but if there are ketones and glucose present, I believe the study said it would prefer the ketones that come from fat. And we all know about the consistency of fat and having that throughout history, and that there wasn't always consistent carbs around. So we kind of know just how humans had to have evolved was to use this fat energy source. So what else about nutrient density? Because I love nutrient density. I'm working on the film. We're working at all these little pieces of the film. Well, anything we talk about actually is part of the film. I'm trying to fit so much into this one thing, but nutrient density is one of those big things. And we're doing a section on just comparing plant to animal foods, and it's a little hard because I don't want to be attacking plants. I don't want to have it seem like this is one-sided thing, but it's we kind of need to share with the audience. It's like, hey, it's kind of the opposite of what you thought, right? We're led to believe that plants are these magical, amazing things, and meat is bad. It's kind of the opposite. I mean, meat is good and it's more bioavailable, and there's not all these anti-nutrients getting in the way. So yeah. So, okay. Well, so maybe I'll back up before I let you go on this anti-nutrients and bioavailability topic, but carnivore in general. So you have a book called The Carnivore Cure, but I always say I'm not into carnivore diets for long periods of time, or I'm not just really in that world, but I think it's a great tool. So maybe you could talk about your idea of carnivore and then talk about that other topic.
Sure. Sure. So one thing I want to say about the kind of carbs in our diet right now, as we were talking, and then I'll get into the carnivore, is that in the 1800s, the average person ate about 22 pounds of sugar a day, or I'm sorry, a year. In 2009, it's 176 pounds. So that seems like a lot, right? 176 pounds of added sugar a year. But if you think about it, it's about 215 grams of carbs a day. So it's not even that much. So we have to wonder, are we getting sick, right? So in 20 years, 10 million more people got obese from 2000 to 2020. So we have to wonder what is going on, right? So are the dietary guidelines maybe just wrong that we are getting more obese so quickly when we have been around forever, right? So how can 10 million more people in America get obese just within a 20-year window? And that 40% right now, 40%, probably more, of kids are either obese or overweight. And we have to think, can carbs have something to do with it, right? And obviously seed oils and stuff. But okay, so leaving that, so my carnivore diet, I ate so I mostly meat-based to heal. And I noticed that working with clients and then even just in my own journey, I found that personalized carnivore is the best. The reason why I'm a big fan of meat-based is because I use it as an elimination diet. So I think some people can do carnivore forever, and that's totally cool, but I focus on the gut. So if you think about it, I am not super against plants. It is just more if you have symptoms or you have kind of ailing symptoms that are still lingering and you're not sure why they're not going away, we just have to consider our food sources, and oftentimes anti-nutrients, which are in plants, right? So plants can't run from their predators. So they have built-in security systems to kind of take care of themselves. And so oftentimes these anti-nutrients, one is gluten, which we are now all very aware of, but these cause harm to our bodies and specifically our guts and absorbing minerals. So if you think about it from that perspective, one example would be tannins, which are in teas, and same thing with flavonoids. So tannins block iron, and then flavonoids, they inhibit mineral absorption. So if you're drinking teas and coffees with your steak, for example, and you're purely carnivore, the risk of the iron being not absorbed is much higher when you're having it with your teas and coffees. So not only that, but now you're also going to block some of the mineral absorption in the actual meats, the minerals in it, because of these anti-nutrients. And that's where the danger of these anti-nutrients lie. Now, when you do an elimination diet perspective of carnivore, so if you think about all elimination diets, their goal is, okay, for some reason you have these ailing symptoms, maybe it's your skin, maybe it's your low energy, maybe it's just you feel toxic eating foods. So let's get to the culprit, let's remove food. So if you think about AIP, Whole30, FODMAP, GAPS protocol, all of them remove certain vegetables and fruits, but they all include meats. Every single one of them. They do not remove meats. And so you have to wonder, well, why don't we just try to remove all plants and make it super easy? Start with meat-based, which is the least irritating to the gut. And then we can figure out, once our symptoms kind of become baseline, okay, let's slowly introduce the plants that are the least toxic and see where we can kind of marry the plant world versus the animals, right? As we talk about other anti-nutrients. So, we all know that gluten is toxic to our gut. So it's not just if you have celiac disease. Gluten has been shown to, well, one, it has phytic acids and lectins, which are other anti-nutrients, but it has been shown to just cause slow damage to your gut. So it causes leaky gut permeability. And the reason why this is all so important in terms of all of these anti-nutrients blocking our minerals and just causing gut damage is we fuel our body with our food, and it has to be fueled and then broken down and then absorbed by our gut health, right? So if you don't have the right gut health, so if you think about it from the stomach, if you don't have enough stomach acid to break down your meats or your plants and then be ready to be digested and absorbed in the small intestine, and if your intestine is leaky, then how are you going to absorb your nutrients? If you are eating high plant foods with lots of anti-nutrients, right? So lectins and gluten and phytic acids, they're all in nuts, seeds, and grains, and they are known to block minerals and also poke holes, basically, essentially, in your small intestine. So if you're eating these nutrient-rich foods with your meat, then you are risking minerals to be less absorbed in the body. And already we have
rich foods,
and then we also
anti-nutrient-rich foods. Yeah, keep going.
Yes, and then we also have less minerals already in our soils, right? So we have less minerals in our soils, so our foods are already nutrient poor compared to eons ago. And then on top of that, we're eating plants that can possibly, and we're eating more and more plants than ever before, and with every single meal. So when you're eating these plant foods that some of them are notorious for blocking minerals like iron and magnesium and zinc, then how much of the nutrients are we absorbing? As an example, phytic acid, again, it's in whole grains, legumes, seeds, and nuts. It's been shown, so cashews and chickpeas, they're known for their nutrient density, but they're rich in phytic acid. So even if you think that you're getting your zinc levels from those foods, well, a study showed that 80% of it is being blocked. So now imagine eating these, the chickpeas with your steak that is rich in zinc. How much of the zinc are you actually absorbing, right? And then if you think about if you have gut damage, so if your small intestine, if you have SIBO or you have leaky gut where your small intestine isn't even absorbing as much of the nutrients, then how much of it are you really absorbing? And so this is where the anti-nutrients really come into play when you're just not feeling as well. And it's a great way to reduce the kind of toxic foods that can damage the body. And then you can reintroduce it later with the safer plants and when you start feeling better.
Yeah, I like that. That's right up my alley. And what we do with Dr. Gary is let's get you onto a diet that you can do for life. And maybe you can do carnivore for life. And yeah, maybe you are going to include, fish, eggs, the salmon roe and the liver, and you can have your full host of nutrients. But let's get you on something that's, you can do and that you don't have to be socially isolated to do. And so it takes some time. You got to heal the gut, and then we can start adding some foods back in. And before I ask you about, what this kind of procedure, like what's the best way to reintroduce foods and some of the safer plant foods, I was just thinking about how many people are nutrient deficient and don't even know it. And it's such a hard thing to study because it's expensive to get all these tests. No one's doing all these tests, but it's just something we just may never know. I mean, maybe in the future we will when we have cheaper testing and, we have all this new technology, whatever we have in the future. But how many people are nutrient deficient and don't know it? Because it's so hard these days to get all the nutrients. You have to know about all these anti-nutrients in plants. You have to be getting like really good, biodynamic, organic, or, fruits and vegetables if you eat those, or regeneratively grown meats. with the, the good soil health, all this stuff. But you also need to know how to properly detoxify the plant foods if you're going to eat them. And then you have to be eating the right variety to get all of them. It actually is pretty hard. And we were doing it in the past. I like this Weston Price little factoid too, that he brought a lot of these foods back and he tested them in the lab in Ohio, and he found that there was 4 to 10 times more nutrients, depending on the nutrients. I forget which ones, but 4 to 10x the native foods that he brought back compared to our modern foods.
I believe it.
So it's just crazy that we don't know. It's just that we don't know what it's doing to us when we are nutrient deficient. It's one of those things too, like we're saying, okay, 88% of America is unhealthy, not metabolically healthy. Something's going wrong.
Right.
And we can point to a million things. And I think it's just one of those things that it's so hard to just say, you're not going to get nutrient deficient in a week or a month. It takes kind of years. So
one thing that's interesting is you can do a hair tissue mineral test, and this only shows your minerals, and it's not conclusive either, so I wouldn't bet everything on it, but you can always take a piece of your hair and then get it tested, and it'll show your mineral levels. It's different than a blood test or a urine test because, urine and blood, it's just a snapshot, whereas the hair tissue mineral, arguably, it's that it shows you what your cells are using for 3 months at a time, and it'll show you the major minerals. So that's a good way to kind of check. But the other thing is minerals all kind of work together. They're either antagonists or they work together. So you just don't know really. And that's the best. That's why it just further validates that if you eat a more nutrient dense kind of real whole foods diet, you have a better chance than trying to, manipulate these minerals or try to eat certain vitamins or supplements to kind of get that balanced out. We have foods that are already balanced and in the most bioavailable way. And that's probably the smartest thing to do. Really, my book, what I try to do with the plants is it's just shedding some light on areas that we never think about, right? So we think that, hey, organic foods, organic plants are super safe. They're super healthy. Well, from my research, the EPA and the USDA, they have all these guidelines for genetically modified foods, for conventional foods. They test them all the time. Well, organic foods, they rarely test it. They just assume, hey, it's safe, and that's that. But the thing is, when I was doing research, and this is in the book, so for the same acre, they use glyphosate or the GMO, and obviously that's super toxic, but they use about 2 pounds per acre. And then the most, organic version in the same acre, they use 9 pounds. So why, if you think about it, they have to use it in much more frequency and much higher of a concentration to be effective to grow these organic plant foods. And at a certain point, we have to wonder, well, maybe the organic versions are not super safe either. There are 2 organic kind of pest controls. One is known as rotenone, and I may be totally butchering how it's said, but in 2005, it was banned, saying that, okay, this organic pest control is toxic for humans. And then for some reason, it became allowed again in 2010. It works so well that now they're creating a lab-created version, and they don't even call it organic. They just call it a pesticide. So we have to wonder, at a certain point, just because it's natural doesn't mean it's safe and that we are using it on our organic plants. Another one is baby carrots. So baby carrots, all that water you see in the bag. So if you get the kind of just the non-organic versions, they use like a chlorinated water solute. So there's chlorine water in what you're about to consume. So make sure to wash it. So then you think, okay, so obviously we'll get the organic baby carrots. Well, organic carrots, that water solute is citrox. And if you look into what citrox does, it's an antibacterial. So every time you're eating these organic baby carrots, and think about how often it says ready to eat, you don't need to wash them, right? So most of us just eat it out of the bag. Well, you're slowly eating little bits of antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. And then you have to wonder why our gut health is so not good right now, right? Genetically modified foods, I think people are starting to pick up that it's really toxic to be eating these, lab created glyphosate rich seeds, right? So the way that GMO foods work is that they spray glyphosate all over these plants. And the plants that are not the ones that are supposed to be growing, they are killed by covering or stopping the shikimate pathway in that plant. Well, human cells don't have that pathway. And so that's why we seem to be okay eating glyphosate. And that's why it's been permitted all this time. But our bacterial cells are affected. So our bacteria on our hands, in our gut, right? So our microbiome, every time we eat genetically modified foods, those little bugs, the glyphosate is going into our gut. And not only is this in our plant foods, it's sprayed all, right? So Roundup or glyphosate is sprayed all over our playgrounds. It's sprayed in our front yards. And the half-life is over 2 weeks. So if your kids stomp on the floor, they're breathing in Roundup, right? And so then if you ingest it from our waters and then you eat it in your plant foods, at a certain point, it's just really toxic. And so these are the things that are not as talked about with plants. And so I'm just, that's why it's brought up in Carnivore Cure. So if you notice certain symptoms are lingering, maybe it'll be beneficial to remove some of the plant foods that are actually really, really rich in herbicides, pesticides, even organic pest control, bugs.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And the way I've always understood it is, like you said, the shikimate pathway is not in humans, but it is in our gut microbiome. So it's ruining while it's technically not damaging to us, but our gut microbiome is so important to our health and it is damaging to them.
Yes.
So that's like the little workaround that these Monsanto people have kind of screwed us with.
So you know what's terrifying about the Monsanto? So Bayer, the pharmaceutical company, purchased them in 2018. So 1 year later, just 1 year, obviously they probably did their due diligence. They looked into probably all the details of Monsanto and their seeds and their sprays, right? 1 year later, Germany declared that they can no longer spray Monsanto in their country. So they can sell it everywhere else in the world. But in Germany now, they said by 2020. So I'm guessing now it's banned. But they have banned Monsanto's glyphosate being sprayed in their own country. And I think that is very telling.
Yeah, that's good. And also it's telling too, we're talking about plant versus animal foods and the downsides of the plant foods. And that is a good point that even if you try and get this organic stuff, it still has a lot of problems. And yeah, just because it's organic doesn't mean it also doesn't have all the same anti-nutrients either. Right. So it's like, even if you do get the safer plant foods, which we could talk about, they could still be grown poorly or just use. I mean, I know there's just all these kind of workarounds with organic farms. You can get labeled organic and then still do this, still do that, right, stuff you talked about. And I mean, yeah, really, if you really want to get the good plant foods, you kind of have to grow them yourself or know a farm that really does it in a truly, biodynamic, whatever the terminology, holistic managed way where they're not using all these workarounds. And it's very few people. I mean, there's probably a handful of them in the country that are really doing it really well. So
yeah, the organic label is the government no longer wanted to manage it. So they kind of said, we're no longer managing the organic label. And so they have third-party companies that are doing it. But I talk about it in the book, how it's kind of, they're all in bed together type of thing. The failure rate within the organic kind of labeling was 30% within the first year or something really high. And it just goes to show that you just don't know. And a lot of our organic foods in the US are actually shipped in from other countries. So you have to wonder, how safe is it, right? Because it's not being grown in the US and by our guidelines type of thing. It's just, I'm not saying that meats are purely safe, right? So you can get the ones that have antibiotics and, people argue that too. But it's just, there are these certain nuances in plant foods that most people don't ever think about, right? You think of a carrot, there is no harm in carrots. And you can even think about, if we were not considering anti-nutrients and we weren't considering the toxins on the actual plant, but even from a bioavailable nutrient perspective for our bodies, well, carrots are rich in supposedly vitamin A, but they don't have the bioavailable version of vitamin A. So they have it in beta carotene. And our body has to, again, and this depends on the gut health, but your body has to convert it to the vitamin A bioavailable form that it could even use, right? So there are some genetic differences where some people don't have the genetics to really break down the plant version of vitamin A to be the absorbed version of vitamin A. Or you could just eat liver and get your, worth in your daily values worth in like 3 ounces, right? And that even if you have the most impaired gut health, since meat is so bioavailable and readily absorbable by the body, you have a higher chance of absorbing the vitamin A from the beef liver in a very small dosage compared to if you were to eat carrots.
This stuff is, the problem is I'm trying to make a film. I'm trying to squeeze that in, like the retinol, preformed retinol versus vitamin A precursor beta carotene, but that's a pretty small nuance. And we're trying to, but I think it says a lot to someone, right? If you're an average viewer and you just don't hear about this, you never hear about anti-nutrients, you never hear about bioavailability, you never hear about the correct forms of the vitamins, you don't know about fat soluble vitamins, and we're still just talking about minerals and vitamins, let alone every other part of food. So it's really hard to kind of put the toothpaste back in the tube with this food stuff. It's crazy that this plant-based agenda like just took off, and it seems what were you saying?
No, I was just going to bring up, you just brought up the fat-free milk. It's just, so the way that we pasteurize milk, we remove a lot of the good enzymes and so we have this almost frankenfood, right? And then milk naturally has fat. So when you then remove the fat, it will automatically remove the fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. So when people say this pasteurized milk in the grocery stores are rich in vitamin D, they are all synthetic vitamins, right? Mm-hmm. And so they just add back, they fortify all our foods with these nutrients that we are supposedly depleted in. But our body doesn't use it the same as if you're eating raw milk in its whole form with the digestive enzymes that could break down the lactose that is gut healing. But instead we eat this frankenfood that's actually gut damaging and actually could cause autoimmune and these other things. And the way that they instead then, when they demonize the fat, what they do to these fat-free milks and low-fat milks is add a ton of sugar to make it palatable for the kids. And so you are forcing these kids that are naturally born in like a ketogenic state to now have to be carb burners or sugar burners from a young age. One study showed that babies that are eating oatmeal when they're young, a lot of babies and kids are starting to have anemia, right? Where they are deficient in iron. Well, there was a study that showed that when kids stop eating oatmeal, which is, remember, has the lectins and the phytates and the gluten, and some of them bind to iron, right? Maybe the reason why some of these kids are anemic is because they're eating so much oatmeal that they shouldn't have been eating in the first place. And so maybe some of our culture will be less anemic if we stop eating these anti-nutrient foods that bind to our iron.
Yeah, and they're just not encouraged to eat animal foods.
Yeah.
And what I was just saying too is we're doing some other nutrient density stuff for the film. Look at oatmeal. I looked up oatmeal, non-fortified oatmeal. It is nothing. There's no nutrients in it. It's just energy. It's just pure grains and like nothing your body really wants. So yeah. I don't understand our fascination with oatmeal until you know the Kellogg story and like Seventh-day Adventists and all this weird stuff with Ellen G. White and John Harvey Kellogg. You can listen to the Dr. Gary Fettke podcast for that one. But yeah, we just got a lot of stuff wrong. It's another interesting thing I found in your book is the food dye stuff. So I thought some of this stuff I think, oh, this is like, I don't need to worry about these small things. But then food dyes, it seems like it is kind of a problem.
Yeah. So, food dye has been shown to cause mood disorders, tumors, and cancers. And so there is kind of like a regulation that if any food or additive shows any sign of carcinogenic effects, that it needs to be pulled. And red number 3 has been shown to do that. And so I think the FDA or some body has been trying to pull it from our foods, and they've been failing. It took about 10 to 20 years for them to finally remove red 3 from our personal care. So you will never see red 3 in lipstick, makeup, shampoos, etc. Well, it's still in our foods. So it is not safe for our personal care, but they are saying that, hey, you can eat it in your maraschino cherries, eat it in your fruit roll-ups, in all the foods, the bright red foods, which again is given to our kids. And remember, these are neurotoxic, cancer-driving additives. And the only reason we add it is for the visual effect. And so again, it's just, why are we adding these things? Just so that they're prettier, so that the food industries make more money, but they are toxic to our children. If you look into any kind of group that's has ADHD children or autism, one of the recommendations is remove the red dyes. So don't feed your kids foods with any red dyes, because it will cause them to go bonkers. So then you have to wonder, well, what does it do to everybody else? A lot of the studies back in the day would show how certain food dyes, at a certain rate, it was safe, and that's how it's been allowed. Well, we eat way more than ever was clinically considered safe. And so at a certain point, again, these foods are triggered or, really focused on our kids, right? The bright colors, our kids want all of these foods. We have to wonder at a certain point, how much of this is affecting their mental health and just overall, impairment to them growing. And again, food dyes, and I have tables of how scary it is in in the book. You think about how there's all these numbers like blue 1, blue 2, and they're not just arbitrary numbers. They're numbers based on, they created a blue 1, a blue 2, and so on and so forth. But if you look at the book, I think the coloring the food dye failure rate is 70%. So over the years, they've pulled so many and they've just introduced different versions. And at a certain point, it's, who cares if we're eating a brown maraschino cherry, if that means that we're not slowly, putting toxins in our bodies.
That's a good point. And it's just one of those things that it all comes together when you just make your own food. Then you don't have to worry about this stuff. And everything's kind of solved. You don't have to worry about MSG or other additives, the food coloring. You don't have to worry about a million things. So I'm kind of luckily switched over to that mindset. And I'll say it did take me a while too. It wasn't overnight. So, I started this journey 6 years ago, and it took me a while to get to this point where I just don't eat out anymore. I mean, it's like this COVID stuff. It's like, I don't even care because I don't really eat out. I mean, yeah, I'll go out with my friends once in a while and we'll eat something at a restaurant. But I mean, really, I'm just saying you can get to the point where you don't really care that much about restaurant food because you can make your own food that tastes better, I think. And it's healthier and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I think that if people were to just remove most of the processed food, so any of the grocery store that's kind of the middle aisles where they're not refrigerated, and if you remove most of that and you remove a lot of the seed oils and, all of the, again, the processed foods with the food colorings, with just the shelf stable stuff, you will be far greater in health. But that's a really difficult thing for a lot of people to do, because I also talk about in the book how sugar is truly addictive, right? So there are studies where rats are addicted to a different drug. I think it was heroin or cocaine. And then they get a taste of sugar and they no longer care about the drug, street drug. And it just shows you how scary sugar can be. So I get it. I mean, I had an eating disorder for 12 years. I totally understand. But this is where you have to, and this is where I talk about it at the last chapter of the book, but you have to figure out your purpose, your why, what will drive you to want to eat better, right? Because, these food industries make foods that are super tasty. They try to find the bliss point of sugar, salt, and fat and make you coming for more, right? At a certain point, if you know that these foods are toxic and not ideal for your health, then you have to figure out what will drive you to want to eat healthier and better. And for me, it was my family, right? I was not present for my oldest son. I was sick. He was in LA while I was getting treatment in Austin. I felt like I failed as a mom, and I was no longer just about, I want to be really thin. I, focused on getting healthy, and now I have my life back. And this is why I give back, right? So this is why I try to educate, because I was plant-based for 12 years and I genuinely thought it was healthy. When my mental health was declining, I never thought that, hey, maybe it's my food. Everyone in California was like, oh, you're plant-based, you're super healthy now, right? Never once did I ever question that the lack of fats was causing me to, have depression, that I wasn't eating enough zinc-rich foods that would make more stomach acid for my gut. that I wasn't breaking down a lot of the plant foods to, absorb the nutrients. And I was mentally really sick. And had I known that a meat-based diet would or eating a lot more meat can actually support my mental health and my whole body, I would have not eaten that way. And I think so many people think that plants are the way to go for true health. And it's just not true.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up your personal story. Maybe you could just spend a few more minutes on that, because I always think it's valuable to hear that. And yeah, your experience. Yeah. So it's 12 years you went down this vegetarian route. So yeah, maybe just say a little more on that.
Yeah. So I grew up, my parents are from Korea. They immigrated in the 70s. And then, so we ate a lot of traditional Korean food. So I actually grew up eating bone broth and stuff. And then, but they didn't know about the American diet. So they bought us TV dinners thinking it's really healthy. It had all the food groups in one little tray, right? So I grew up eating that. I'd say in college, I probably gained a little bit of weight. And then I found the Master Cleanse a little after college. It was the kind of the new thing around the block. And so I've always been inquisitive. I tried the Master Cleanse, read the doctor's book, and the doctor would say, hey, if you eat meat, it putrefies in your gut. And that just made so much sense to me. And so I then went plant-based for 12 years. I had occasional fish, but in general, I ate mostly carbs and lots of salads, and I ate very low fat. And yes, I lost the weight that, I wanted to be a size 0, and I got there. But over the years, I was getting more and more depressed, anxious, and behind closed doors, I started using behavior. So I think my body did not have enough fat. So I would start craving things. And so behind closed doors, I started binging. And then I would then have the kind of after effect of, oh no, I'm going to gain weight, and then people are going to judge me, and those things. And so then it started just trickling into a complete disordered eating, where I would either restrict or I would use laxatives or whatever it was to kind of, compensate for the binge. And I would do that for about 10 to 12 years. So I was plant-based for that long, never touched pork, chicken, beef, any of that. And, I created this facade to my friends that, hey, I'm really healthy. I'm thin because I followed this plant-based, and I'm just so successful, whether with my career, life, whatever it is. But behind closed doors, I was slowly dying mentally, depression, anxiety. And finally, when I had my first child, it just hit the wall. I got on antibiotics because I had mastitis 6 months in. And I wasn't really eating enough. I was nursing around the clock because I was, obsessive of I need to be that perfect parent. And ironically, I got sick. I lost my memory. They put me in a hospital. And every morning I would ask for my son, saying, I need to nurse him. And they would say, you stop nursing because you're in the hospital. And I don't remember it because I was sick. I don't know if the antibiotics wiped up my mental health. I have no idea. But what they told me was every day I'd ask for him, and every day they would have to tell me that I stopped nursing because, again, I wouldn't remember. And when I went out of there, ironically, right, so I wanted to be the perfect mom, but instead my son was with my parents in Los Angeles, and I went to get the eating disorder treatment in Texas. And although I learned so much about, self-care and all the cognitive behavioral therapy and learning what my needs are, and all of that was super beneficial in there, the diet was so wrong. So everything was in moderation. Hey, you need to be able to eat 2 slices of microwave pizza, and you need to eat the salad with the full fat dressing. And then you also need to be challenged with the trigger food of yours, whether it's a cupcake, some junk food. And then if you don't eat those full meals at least twice in the day, then they would end up putting you in a private room to eat the Ensure, which is basically seed oils and high fructose corn syrup. And that would be considered nutrition. And so the diet was wrong. And so when I left there, I would fall back into my behaviors, not understanding that my diet was the core issue. And so in there, they would accept that you're plant-based. So I never had to eat meat in there. But if I were to go, I don't like sugar, or I don't like excess added sugar, they'd say, no. That's an eating disorder behavior. You need to be able to eat sugar. And if you don't, then you're not healed from your eating disorder. So they'd always put these like cupcakes and processed foods as your test foods. And as long as you could sit there and not squirm and feel bad, then you're finally healing. And that was how they taught you to get better. So lots of good stuff mentally, but the diet part was absolutely horrid. Then I found keto and I noticed again healing, but I was still plant-based. So I never ate meat on keto. And then, I just started seeing people post more and more about how meat is healing them. And I tried it and I've never looked back. I've, struggled in the first year of trying to stay carnivore, but overall, it's given me my life back. I'm present with my kids. I'm giving back and serving the community. And I've written a book because I literally felt like I have another kind of lease on life. And if people could just see certain toxins that they never would think are in the plant foods or in our processed foods that we would ever think is actually the food and not us, that was the whole point of the book, right? A lot of times when we fail at a diet or we fail at losing weight, we think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do it? Why can't I just stay motivated? But maybe we're fueling our foods, our bodies with the wrong foods that are not allowing us to thrive and even fight these kind of demons that we have. And my hope with this book is that I give you enough tools and resources that you can get started and really stop blaming yourself for being obese or overweight and start realizing that maybe some of our dietary guidelines are totally toxic.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you're preaching to the choir here, but I mean, thank you so much for that story. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to share these personal details, but I appreciate you, letting us into your life a little. And
oh, thank you.
And I think it's a good learning experience because yeah, a lot of people, they don't want to look at their diet and think that that's the problem. They think because a society says this is a great diet, then it must be, and then it must be something else the problem. And man, I wish I could go to that food, what type of facility it was, and change their dietary preferences, because that is crazy.
So all of those eating disorder facilities, they follow the US dietary guidelines. And that's why those guidelines are so important to change, because it bleeds into our school system. It bleeds into these eating disorder facilities. It bleeds into what dietitians that are regulated by these governing boards say is what is healthy. Because again, when the governing board is saying that saturated fats are toxic or that we should be limiting it, well, the dietitians in these eating disorder facilities cannot be saying you should eat more red meat, right? I don't think we ever had red meat in there, actually. Maybe we had a meatball. I don't know. I mean, I never ate it in there, but it's just interesting that, the dietary guidelines are so wrong, and then it bleeds into everything else, right? If you think about hospitals, the diabetics that are in there, they feed them the dietary guidelines, which is really high in sugar. And that's the last thing you should be feeding a diabetic, right? So it's really, really sad. And it's just unfortunate. And at this point, we just have to wonder, maybe our dietary guidelines are wrong and what we're eating is wrong. And that's why we're getting sick. We're getting morbidly obese, and why we're sicker than ever as a nation.
Well, yeah, I'm making a whole film about it. It's sad that the 2020 guidelines just came out recently, and there were no changes. It was the same old bad stuff. It's really sad that, a lot of people, Nina Teicholz and the Nutrition Coalition, did their best for years. They've been on it. I signed some petition, to go to the
I did too.
Senate or whatever it was, and it didn't do anything. They're still on this same old train, and we just have to take it upon ourselves to make the changes, and the system's not set up to heal people. We just have to realize that. I've been on a tear on social media lately, writing about, I feel bad for people who are doctors reading my posts, because I hope people who are, good doctors doing the good things realize I'm not talking to them, but that I'm saying this doctors, through all their training, they learn how to treat sick people. They learn the allopathic model. They learn to prescribe drugs and do surgeries. And that's what they're trained to do. They're not trained to keep people well. But why? And that's fine. That is what it is. And I kind of know why the system got set up that way. And, it's money, business, stuff like that. But the big question is, why do we think that they are these wellness experts, and that they are in America, at least, they're the most trusted people for health, right? You go to your doctor. My doctor said this. This is the doctor. The diet my doctor said to do. This is the doctor. This is, these are the respected people. but they have the least training in wellness. And so, I mean, maybe there needs to be, well, the problem is I would never trust the government to figure out how to train, say if there was these dietitians and nutrition practitioners that were equal in stature to doctors, but it would only work if they're trained correctly. But I guess I was thinking, like, we need wellness professionals to have that same stature as doctors, and maybe they need more training and schooling so they have the same level of respect and they know the biochemistry and all the physiology of the human body. But they are focused on wellness instead of just sick care. So
right. So the interesting thing is that I personally think this really stems from our schooling system. And this is part of the reason why I finally pulled my kids out of school. But when we're in elementary school, and I saw this even when when my son did kind of the online schooling, and they were reading this book about kind of obeying the rules and listening to authority. And I think we're ingrained since a young age that basically if we want to have ourselves heard, we have to raise our hand, that we basically march to the bell, right? And then we also don't question authority, right? So we are told that if the police pull us over, we stay quiet, we listen, we do as they say, we trust the doctor, we trust whatever professional to have the right answer. And so I think when we get older, right, and we're kind of bred into this system, then when we have an authority, right, supposed authority, and we don't know how much nutrition school they've had, we just think, okay, they're a doctor, they must know my body better than I ever will. So if they're telling me to take this medication, they must know, right? And so I'm going to do that. So most people never question that you can have a like osteopathic way of healing rather than the, allopathic way of, being a doctor. And it's just unfortunate because most people just follow suit without ever questioning that maybe their doctor is wrong, or maybe their doctor is not telling them the full story, right? So for example, like if you're taking statins, the doctor should tell them that, hey, you're going to be deficient now in CoQ10. So while you're taking the statin, you should also be taking CoQ10 for your heart health, right? Mm-hmm. But they don't do this stuff like that. Or when they put you on birth control pills, they don't go, well, you're going to be now deficient in folate and all these other nutrients. And I have a table for that in the book. But they should be telling you these things, right? Because that's true care, right? It's, okay, fine, you want to take birth control because you want this to stop. But then you should also think about other parts of the body that will have to detox that medication and then take all the nutrients for it. And we just don't have that care. And it's just really unfortunate. As you were saying, the allopathic care is really, okay, so you're here for a headache. How do I get rid of the headache? Not what is causing your headache, right? And that's the core issue, right? So if you have diabetes, let me give you some metformin or insulin or something to reduce your blood sugar. But again, what is the root cause of the blood sugar increasing? That's never the question, right? And that is the crux of the issue right now.
It's the absolute crux of the issue. And I mean, we can talk about this forever, but I guess we got to wrap it up at some point. I do need to finish something off because we did kind of tee up that we were going to talk about the least harmful plant foods and what are the safest plant foods. So you said avocado and kimchi. I forget what that was in relation to, but those are two foods that I like. So if you're not making your own kimchi, though, it could have a lot of sugar in it. But I do love fermented foods. But yeah, keep going from there.
Yeah. So avocado is actually a 50-50. So I have a top, I think, 10 safe plant lists to kind of first start with. They're pretty boring, to be honest. But avocados actually have salicylates in them. So some people are sensitive to that. And then they're also high on the FODMAP. And so these are the kind of something saccharides that can actually affect people that have gut health issues. So if you are not sensitive to that, then it can actually be beneficial for the potassium and other nutrients. And with kimchi, and these are again the nuances, and I know people say sometimes it's a little too much, but if you are, getting affected by consuming kimchi or sauerkraut or these other fermented foods, then this might be the reason. But if you have candida or any type of fungal overgrowth, and then you eat fermented foods, it can actually feed the opportunistic yeast. So if you have no gut issues, then eating these types of probiotic foods, prebiotic foods are great. I believe that metabolic flexibility is the most ideal, right? So it's not that you just eat meat because that's the only thing you can tolerate, but you choose to eat meat because you feel best. But if you wanted to eat kimchi, you wanted to eat avocado, you feel great still on it. That's, I think, optimal health in my opinion. And so the foods that I put on the kind of top 10 list, like one of them was bok choy. And where the way I sort of categorized it, it's really hard because all plants have anti-nutrients. So, but I think that lectins, phytates, oxalates are probably the most toxic. Then I considered foods that are lower on the FODMAP. So for, these tested and tried and tested sort of elimination diets, right? So if they were, I think, removed from AIP, GAPS, and FODMAP, I think I also removed those plant foods as well. And so you were left with these really kind of boring foods. So lettuce. So it's ironically, it's the foods that have the least amount of nutrients. So therefore, they would have the least amount of anti-nutrients. So I think lettuce was one. And obviously, you want to boil. And I know there are some people that say lettuce has like runoff of toxins, but I mean, you can argue that with anything. You could argue that your water is toxic. But I would say lettuce is one of the safer ones. Bok choy. I think broccoli was one. And I know broccoli is highly debatable by some people. But if you steam it and you boil it and then you remove a lot of the anti-nutrients, and then I talk about how to properly prepare and you could even soak and sprout certain seeds to better consume it. But those would be some of the three. I think there was also some other just like leafy, I wouldn't say leafy greens. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's just some plant foods, pretty boring. I considered people that have diabetes. So there's no fruits on it too, just because of that. And then also a lot of plant foods, a lot of fruits use a lot of the pesticides. So I think apples, for example, or maybe it was strawberries, they use the most amount of pesticides for any plant food out there. So, just considering all of these, I did not include fruits as part of this top 10 safe foods.
Mm-hmm. Well, check it out. Yeah. I'm telling you, there's so much in here. I guess you kind of did. It seems like you did this book as you did your social media over the years, and you put out all these great diagrams and graphics on social media, and then they all kind of made their way into the book. So it's really great. Where can people find you and the book?
Yeah, so the book is called Carnivore Cure. It's basically available in the US on Amazon as the paperback, or you could get it from our website. The ebook is kind of everywhere. So you could get it at Barnes & Noble, Apple, iBooks, and then Amazon as well. And then my handle on most social media platforms is Nutrition with Judy.
Okay, great. Yeah, good times. And thanks for, doing this with me, and can't wait to get to Austin in April and can do some more meetups in person.
Yes, we have to eat more steaks.
All right. Well, that's it. I'll see you next.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for sharing with a friend, giving us a review on iTunes or any other podcast app, checking out the Food Lies YouTube channel where we're putting up more and more videos each day. We're also doing highlight clips from some of the video episodes. More to come there. Go to sapien.org, become a member of the tribe, be part of our Sapien program if you want to make some significant dietary changes, and get your act together, get that healthy lifestyle in the new year going. And nosetail.org for all our great products. We got the biltong there I didn't mention earlier. Dried meat snack that's extra soft and not all stuffed with sugars and nitrates and other stuff like beef jerky. And it has some extra fat in there as well. Our seasonings, body care, and the art is live. The art is live. Forgot to mention that. Click on the art section. We have a great artist out of the UK doing animal-based prints. Good stuff. See you next week.